think we're double check that we're unmuted, maybe double check that folks can hear us. Yeah, we're unmuted.
So
We should go.
you're on. You do the roll.
Oh, well, do you want to do an introduction?
Okay, welcome everyone. This is Fairfax County Wetlands Board meeting on Tuesday, January 30th, 2024. Jerry Highland Government Center. I'd like to first of all call to order and ask Ms. Herman to call the roll.
Hi, so as usual, I'm going to go down the list by alphabetical order, last name. So Brian Campbell,
Present.
John Collins. He's not here, but he might be joining us late, so keep an eye out for him. Dean Costello.
Present.
Bert Kramer.
Present.
Kim Larkin.
Present. Did you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we heard you. If you could, for the record, explain where you're calling from and the reason that you're not with us in person.
Yeah, I'm calling from Kipta Peak, Virginia, and I'm not in person. I got called away for a project with my work.
Thank you, Kim.
Mhm.
Moving along, Stephen Chappelle
Here.
and Clyde Wilbur.
Present.
Perfect.
So to complete that little inclusion of Kim, I'd like all of us to confirm that we can all hear Kim. Everybody just say aye. All hear clear. Kim, you can hear all of us, correct?
I can, thank you.
Okay, there's a little more formal piece to that, but that one I think we have to meet.
And before we move on real quick, I thought I'd mention that virtually I see Khadijah online. I believe she's just listening in for VMRC tonight. She has a presentation or topics that she wanted to talk about, so.
And we have two visiting people here tonight. If you don't mind, would you mind introducing yourselves?
Most of you know me, Larry Zaragoza. I'm JT Kelly with Wetland Studies.
Very good. Okay, so this is the first meeting of the year, and the first item on the agenda is election of chair and vice chair. I'm going to start with nominations for the chair. You have a nomination for the chair.
I'd like to nominate Clyde Wilbur
I
for
second.
the chair.
Kim seconds.
Are there any other nominations? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. The motion passes. And I appreciate your vote of confidence. Now we need to have a nominations for the vice chair. I would like to nominate Brian Campbell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any other nominations? All those in favor of Brian? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Very good. I will be handing over all my correspondence, and you're going to have to do all the work from here on out. I'm going to miss all the rest of the meetings. You're going to run them all. No. All right. So on the agenda tonight, we have a number of different things. And the first is a discussion of future tidal wetlands outreach in 2024. What I would like to do, if everyone agrees, is I would like to go through the proposal I've put together for this, have a discussion with the board about it, and then ask the other people present to give public comment. But I need your agreement. Is that all right with everyone?
That's fine.
Okay, all right. So I've put together this document. Why don't we hand this out? I think all of you have this, but not our visitors.
Thank you.
So what we're discussing here, first and foremost, is a goal that I'm proposing for the Wetlands Board for 2024. And that is to reduce the burden in making, well, the goal is to promote living shorelines by making installation of living shorelines easier for tidal wetlands property owners. We have had testimony over the past 2 years of people indicating it is quite difficult to get through the permitting process. I don't so much want to discuss the specifics of why that is or is not, but we can. But first of all, that's the goal that I'm really proposing here. And I identified 4 bullets of actions to reduce that, and then actions for outreach. Let me just run through these and then we can discuss them. First, to reduce the burden by calling on planning and LDS to work together on the following. Create a county checklist covering chapters 116 and 118, any other areas of regulation impacting a living shoreline. Second, permit 1 permit application for all regulations where a living shoreline is proposed. And 3, to the maximum extent possible, reduction in application burden where living shoreline is proposed. And in addition, a model permit for people to look at, to understand what they may have to do for various levels of different types of living shorelines. Some are very simple, some are complex.
That's basically a template.
Actually, yes, it's a template, yes, but a little more than a template. I think we would have an actual example. This is what a plat would look like. This is, you have to show this. This is where you get the NOAA levels of future water
Here's the
levels.
website for this, here's the,
Yes,
for that, okay.
right. And then following that, conduct outreach first to county staff. Pretty clear that there needs to be some coordination between LDS and planning to make these things go smoother. I don't know if you've noted, but all the permits we issue have this admonition in them that you have this permit, but you may need other permits. We know what those permits are, but you should just go find them. Well, it kind of seems to me like we ought to have 1 permit and not tell them they have to go search for the rest of them. And then a mailing to have a little less than 1,000 property owners that live on the shore of Fairfax County. And I think it would be helpful to have some actual in-person public meetings. The people at Harbor View have indicated they would like us to come talk to them, but I would like to have something substantive to give them before doing that. So I'll stop there and first, board members, do you have any comments on the proposed goal and the objectives?
So for point 3 on reduce the burden, right, provide maximum possible reduction in application burden. What specifically does that mean?
So in reviewing some of the permits that we have issued, for example, in 118, there can be a requirement to do a water quality impact study. However, those impact studies have a wide variation in what is actually done and required, depending on who is looking at it from LDS. In addition, as near as I can tell, virtually everything that is asked for in those studies is in the living shoreline application. So it's like you're asking them to do it twice. Plus, in the 118 language, this is just my interpretation, it really appears that the county has the ability to waive virtually all those requirements. Not everything, but under certain conditions, less than 2,500 square feet of disturbance, less than, which virtually all of our applications are, but very rare to have more than 2,500 square feet. It doesn't seem to me you really need a separate application.
When you say county, what entity is the one that can waive the requirements?
Well, it's an ordinance. So it really isn't assigned in the ordinance, as I understand it. However, as a matter of practice, 116, our ordinance, is controlled by planning. And 118, the Chesapeake Bay ordinance, is controlled by LDS. Zoning, which can impact us as well, is in planning. There may be others that I don't know about, right? I mean, you know, I might do a volunteer on this, but I think that there is a need to coordinate this. Now, I'll jump ahead a little bit. If you all agree to this, what I would suggest is I would go talk to Rachel Flynn, the Deputy County Administrator, who's over both LDS and DPD, and discuss with her, you know, could we get together and do some of this? And kind of the wherewithal that I have to make that bold request is the EQAC suggestion to the Board of Supervisors to do outreach. You know, it is just a recommendation to the county. They're not required to do it. But the other thing I would like to do is ask all of you to physically go visit with the supervisor who appointed you and discuss this with him. Because if we gain their support, I get funding. Frankly, it is unrealistic to think that Catherine is going to do all this.
Hey, Clyde, I just have some comments because I've walked through some projects through the 118 process. And there's a couple things that I think we need to ask the county to concur on about living shorelines. And I think some of that is they don't have adverse impacts on floodplains. And we can agree that any impact that they may or may not have based on what the materials you use are not detrimental. And maybe that's just a conversation, but floodplains, sometimes they will require you to do a floodplain study for, you know, the tiniest little thing at LDS when it's kind of a wash at the end of the day. The elevation's still the same, especially in a tidal condition. So if we're talking about tidal wetlands in a tidal condition, that floodplain is not going to change significantly that elevation.
Yes. Which
And-
is kind of
and-
my point about the, you know,
Yeah.
maximum possible reduction. And my reading of the 118 is we probably have the authority to just do that. But go ahead, Kim, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So 118 is based on, and it's almost exactly the language that's in the Chesapeake Bay Act. So I think there's another hurdle we kind of have to address at the state level. And actually they're going over a few things right now. I just got a public comment period for the Bay Act locality program compliance review. So it may be a discussion to have at the state level as well as the locality, but I think we're going to hit some resistance to get them to change items in there without the state support under the Bay Act. So I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So I would point something out. This is the Wetlands Board. It's not LDS. It's not planning. It's the Wetlands Board. And our job is preserve and protect wetlands. And I think more so since 2020, get as many living shorelines in as we can practically do. LDS has a different purpose. Planning has a different purpose. So we're not always going to be in complete agreement. But I think the way we've been going along is really haven't coordinated well. So I'll stop there. I think more discussion.
Is there going to be an issue with LDS and DPZ agreeing on a consistent approach. I'm thinking more in terms of whether or not one entity or the other is going to guard their turf and dig in their heels about trying to make everything consistent.
So, without commenting about staff, and how they
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
about things,
obviously.
I'm not making this request to LDS.
Mhm.
I'm making this request to the board of supervisors. And, you know, that's the reason for touching base with Rachel Flynn first, and also for asking you to talk to the board of supervisors. Now, kind of outside of our world and jurisdiction, there are issues of enforcement of the RPA. Now, technically, tidal wetlands are part of the RPA. So there is kind of an LDS role in tidal wetlands. But they don't have the role of promoting living shorelines. It's a different role. So I really think that this really ought not to be so much up to LDS or planning as it really ought to be up to the Board of Supervisors, and probably, I'm going to ask for this, implemented with the leadership of Rachel Flynn. That's my current thinking.
If I could provide a little bit of history, that would help.
Yeah.
So for tidal wetlands, up until this point has come up, the way I've coordinated with LDS on projects that have potential impacts to RPA is we've agreed that permit applications will come to VMRC through the joint permit application, and then I work with VMRC and the Corps as needed, the Corps of Engineers, to review the project within our three entities' jurisdictions. That's the first major phase of a project that is touching or very near or close to a shoreline. And then once that project gets the permits that it needs from either the Wetlands Board, VMRC, and or the Corps, then that project gets pushed to LDS for their review for compliance and a WQIA, the Water Quality Impact Assessment for the RPA. And so we've always done tidal wetlands first, then RPA, and not done it at the same time because I think for a couple reasons, we want to let the state and federal and Wetlands Board have their say in a project before it comes to the county for the RPA assessment, if that makes sense. So that's how it's been operating for 20 years. Just to give some background of how it does get handled, how all of these permits that we see here and that you all approve do go to LDS, and they then take that information that's submitted that they need, and then we'll assess it for impacts to the RPA through their sets of forms and other things based on what the project is, right? Hopefully that helps provide like a little.
I think it does, but I think what we just heard, please don't take this as a criticism. This is what people are complaining about.
Yeah.
This is what they're complaining about. It is that, you know, you won't even look at it until I have the Corps approval. So it has to be sequential. So it takes the Corps 2 months to approve. Well, we could have been approving during that 2 months. So I don't know how this is going to play out.
Well, I will say though, that if the Corps said, like denies a permit, I don't know that you all would
Our
want to
permit-
issue a permit.
Yeah, but our permit doesn't do any good.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
And
so it,
that's the point.
yeah, so, but it's, you know, think about the people who come to us, you know, so I have a very small life where I was a contractor. You know what's expensive? What is the most expensive thing?
Time.
Time. So when you add 2 months to this permit application, he's sitting there.
I think though, if things are going to be going in some way, it sounds kind of concurrently, and I think that's intrinsically not a bad idea. I think we have to accept kind of upfront that there will be circumstances where there will be wasted effort.
Yes, but
Wasted, so not applicable.
my goal is more living shorelines.
Mhm.
And people are not applying for living shorelines. They're not, unless they have a ton of money. And I want to make it as easy as possible. I want to do outreach so people feel that they can do them. And I also help out. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ken.
We have to introduce.
Oh, John.
Hello. Sorry, I've been, I think my mic's been acting up and, so sorry to break in. I finally got it working.
So John,
I think
before
there's-
you start, we
Yes.
have to do the procedural thing. Go
Yes.
So,
Yes, I'm John Collins. I'm a board member.
yeah, John, this is Katie. Would you mind telling us where you're calling in from and the purpose of your remote participation tonight?
Yes, I'm calling in from my home. I was working late and I was not able to get to the meeting on time, so I'm calling in remotely.
Okay, thank you.
So, John, can you hear me speaking?
Yes, I can.
All right. Board members, can you hear John speaking?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Very good. Thank you.
The floor is yours, John. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry to chime in. I like the idea here. I think that having one checklist certainly would alleviate one of the big sources of frustration. I have a concern that's kind of twofold. Someone mentioned the possibility of people defending their turf. And I know from experience, there seem to be times when RPA goals and their own procedures would conflict with our directives. I think, for instance, by statute, the RPA in theory is concerned most with erosion control. And in theory, if you take down a tree, they are concerned with replacing it with anything ranging from ivy to grasses to trees. But in practice, they focused on foliage. And that's not really in line with the living shoreline. And there can be a number of situations where a living shoreline would dictate the removal of, for instance, a pine tree. And the RPA would say, absolutely not, because you cannot remove foliage. You cannot remove an oak tree. You cannot remove this. And in fact, any of the grading that might be done to support a living shoreline would be detrimental to the RPA purposes. I think that's one big piece. The other big piece that I think is going to create a red tape barrier is that a lot of the documentation that the RPA group seems to rely on is not found in statute, but is found in their public facilities manual. It's nowhere referenced in the statute. So the moment you start trying to codify what actually are they requiring, there may be pushback because that forces them to encode things that previously have just been institutional knowledge. So I do have a concern there that this is going to be difficult to get them to agree on for those reasons.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, if it was easy, we wouldn't need to do it. But I think you're right. This is not going to be something that just happens. But again, I have to say, as I read 118, they have a lot of flexibility as long as they're under 2,500 square feet of disturbed area.
I hate to disagree with you. My experience has been that, yes, the statute says that, but the moment you open an application to remove bamboo or poison ivy, they come back with much more than the statute demands. I have seen lawful requests for tree removal met with demands that 10 mature oak trees be brought in by hand for replacement. And so that's what I'm saying. What is in the statute and what is their practice institutionally is quite far apart. And the moment you try to ask them to set a checklist, that forces them to write down things they may not be willing to do.
But wouldn't you want the opportunity of having everyone in the same room, same time, so when they make that claim, that you have others to kind of counter offer and speak to what our objectives are and our thought process and what we feel is justified? Yeah, exactly. And the only reason why I bring this up is because I practice this on a regular basis on transportation projects that I'm involved with, where it's we have regularly monthly meetings called interagency coordination meeting, where all different federal, state, and whatever environmental agencies, jurisdictions sit in one room, and we talk about all the things that we're concerned about on a particular project, and we kind of come to a consensus of who has jurisdiction, who overrides who, what are recommendations versus requirements, and then at the end, at the close of it, there's a consensus, and you're done and over with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't pursue this. I'm just trying to set what I perceive as a realistic obstacle we're going to have to contend with. And one thing I would strongly encourage, just based on our own issues we've had to deal with over the past year and a half, I think you would want to make extremely sure that this process looks very open and like we are not attempting to legislate from the board, because I think there is a lot of mistrust about that. So I think by being open and collaborating, if we can come up with a checklist, absolutely, I think that would be a huge win. I think we are going to have to make sure we're ready to contend with perhaps some bureaucratic turf protectionism.
So maybe the suggestion is to not just send this to the county and talk to our supervisors, but also to send it to DEQ and say, chapters 118 have to do with the Chesapeake Bay Act. There are conflicting guidelines between the Chesapeake Bay Act and the installation of living shoreline. And requesting that they have open public comments right now, requesting that they consider the inclusion of living shorelines as an excluded action under the Chesapeake Bay Act.
So we may have a difficulty in doing that. You are all appointed members of a county board. We have to be careful that we are not allowed to advocate a position as part of the board other than to the Board of Supervisors. Did I say that correctly?
Okay.
I'm not saying you couldn't do it yourself, Kim. And you could do it as an individual, but we can't take a position on policy, legislation, or anything else as a board unless it is approved by the Board of Supervisors. But I don't disagree with you. Perhaps as interesting in this is that there is a bill before the Senate right now, which would require VMRC to produce regulations, not guidance, but regulations on the implementation of living shorelines and when permits are or are not required for maintenance. I don't know if that's going to pass.
It's non-living shorelines.
Pardon?
It's non-living.
For non-living shorelines, yes.
Like when you can use them as opposed to living shorelines?
It's intended to get some clarification on what maintenance and repair may need for a non-living shoreline structure.
Sorrel, it's a Sorrel bill, and he is, the right word, chair?
Senate Majority Leader.
He's what?
Senate Majority Leader.
Senate Majority Leader. So bills by the Senate Majority Leader sometimes go.
Yeah.
Not a small thing. Well, having taken these comments, if the board agrees, I'd like to open it up to our two visitors. Would you like to introduce yourself again and maybe
Yeah.
start?
JT Kelly with Wetlands Studies and Solutions. for those who might remember back to the summer, I was before you guys for a living shoreline permit application, which I actually got a couple of comments from you guys, Kim specifically about the vegetation. We'd also had some coordination with you about a little bit in the design as well. So the substantive comments that I received from all the different submissions, the JPA went in, went through the WQIA process, and that's actually that. Comparing to other projects, that was a pretty streamlined version, I will say. You go in as a water dependent use, and I didn't get any comments really on the design or anything like that. So by the time I got to you guys, and then with the input from you, we made a few design changes into the planting palette and a little bit to the breakwater. And they're in the process of finishing that up right now, actually. So that's one thing. The permitting, I wanted to say this is, I'm glad to hear you guys talking about analyzing the procedure and streamlining, because that is one of the problems, is sometimes it sits with someone while someone else is supposed to be doing it. Concurrent processing is a very good thing. And if we get multiple comments, then we just have one meeting or multiple meetings and square it away, then make the change. So it can be worked out efficiently, and it can cut the time down. Yeah. LDS, as far as the permitting goes with the review of the WQIA, they just, in the submission, we have to simply state that all wetlands permits will be obtained. So it's kind of a conditional approval out of them, meaning we have to then follow through, get permits from you, get permits from the applicable agencies. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, Kim, you mentioned the floodplain use determination. That was another one. That's another, another part of it where it usually we'll get a floodplain use determination for minor fill. That's less than 278 cubic yards and 5,000 square feet. And that's, if you submit it, you show you're not changing things, they'll issue the use determination, and that clears the hurdle with the WQIA as well.
Who issues that use determination?
It's LDS.
It's LDS.
Yeah.
But it's a different part of LDS. It's a different part of LDS.
Yeah, it's Demani Kumar, or his delegates. So, and I guess the other thing, you were talking about an exclusion for less than 2,500 square feet. From LDS perspective, there's no, with respect to RPA encroachment, which you can't avoid with a living shoreline, there is no, like, if it's less than 2,500 square feet, but impacting the RPA, you still have to go through that process efficiently. Like I said,
they act that way, but it's not how the ordinance is written.
Well, so the guy that founded our company, Mike Rolband, he's now running DQ, but I was taught by him that even 1 square foot of RPA encroachment needs to be coordinated with LDS. Because you don't need a site plan, but you still need the approval through LDS to encroach in the RPA at all. So that's how I operate.
The town wetlands are in the RPA.
Exactly. So there's no way to avoid RPA encroachment with a living shoreline. But I can tell you also, your goal of increasing living shorelines, my project was here. I've had 2 or 3 other inquiries, and our Maryland group has gotten several as well. So it is much more, and before that, very, very little. But in the last year, I will say it has definitely become more of a question, more of something that people are looking to do. And like I said, if we can streamline the process even more, as long as we're designing them right and they're going in right, because that'll be the only problem with a streamlining process is if you start to bypass or someone doesn't design it right and then they start failing. But obviously, like you guys, I mean, at least this board knows what they're talking about when they do it, obviously. But you just want to make sure that checklist is thorough. And I don't know, I've been beat to death with checklists on occasion, but they're good.
So I do want to hear from Larry, but I also want to ask you, the model permit aspect of this. Do you think you could cover a lot of your concerns with your model?
As far as design goes?
No, let's say that as a part of the process we're talking about here, if you had a model permit for a living shoreline that described a model living shoreline for Fairfax County, keep in mind, you know, this is for Fairfax County. This is
Yes.
not for Norfolk. All right, so we only have so many kinds of shorelines here that would fit for.
There's a good bit that has to go into the JPA that a typical owner may have issue with or may have some trouble putting together. Now, my experience has been that when a homeowner does a permit application, they get a little bit of a different treatment. And so in that respect, that could be, it could be a definite avenue. If you have a model permit and everybody's on board, like you're saying, with, okay, let's do this, and then they know what to look for when they're getting a submission. All right, this one. This one's missing certain things. Let's explain to them how to get that out or shown. And that is a viable option.
Thank you. Larry?
So I want to say that I think a lot of it. I want to give you some other perspectives. I think I may underappreciate that aspect. One of the things that I know a number of people worry about is, okay, well, if I were to put in a shoreline, and you look at what happens around you where things, you know, are just subject to water flow, it can erode. And it's going to not only erode, but it's going to wash my yard into the creek, which we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to dredge on a periodic basis. So you know, that's a real concern. And you can have the steeper the slope, the less yard they give up. But at the same time, you probably have a bit less stability. And so there's a trade-off there. One of the things I think that worries people that I've heard them talk about is, okay, so I have some erosion of my living shoreline and I have stuff that goes into the creek. But my concern is I don't want my whole yard to disappear. And so what happens if you put in a living shoreline and you continue to have this flow of material into the water and you continue to lose yard? Does that mean that you're not going to be able to build it back up and you're just going to lose all that yard? That's a real concern from a lot of people.
So what would you do, Larry?
So what you could do is you could give people the ability to repair their living shoreline so that they don't lose an additional yard beyond that which it was designed.
Good point.
But then there's an issue with that too. If I were sitting on the wetlands board, one of the things I'd be concerned about is the wetlands. And so when you end up doing something like that, then you end up disturbing the wetlands. And if you want to have a high quality wetland, that is something that is, you can try to create one, but once you get it, you don't want to destroy it. So that's a really, really tough trade-off. I also want to say that what you're doing is very consistent with the 2020 law. As a matter of fact, there was language in the law that basically called out streamlining the process and making it easier to put in shorelines. But quite frankly, I worry more about the design of living shorelines than I do about bulkheads, because when you look at the bulkheads around the county, and generally they know what they need to do. They've been here for a long, long time. And so chances are they're not gonna, if a contractor screws up, there's language in the contract where they're gonna have to make it right. And I would also note that when a lot of these communities were developed, there was consideration of leaving shoreline natural. And I think that developers did that where they could. The reason they put in a bulkhead is because they felt they needed it for shoreline stability. So in places like canals in particular, I think it's really, really hard, because if you look at the slope, we did a little bit of a survey of properties in our community. And if you look at the slope and you go with something like a 1 to 10 slope, you're gonna be actually going to the house in some cases.
We had a permit a number of years ago that was on the Potomac. And it was, the fence was far too long to install a living shoreline, simply impractical. But in addition, the applicant wanted to put the new bulkhead in seaward of the existing bulkhead, which meant taking some, they didn't own the land actually, but it meant taking some living shoreline. And we approved it because it was only 25 feet from the existing bulkhead to her front door. So we thought it was really kind of silly to ask her to bust up her lawn. Now, we did ask for a mitigation fee. But I think you're right. There's a need to really consider everything in a site-specific way. But I appreciate your comment about, is there a way that we can move forward with making sure that people can maintain their living shorelines? I have to think about how we could do that, but it's an important comment. Thank you.
Or in fact, we just added to the design. Basically like an O&M component.
That's exactly what my thought was.
Yeah, you can. You could do that. Now, we do that in violations. We add an O&M component to violations. But I don't think we've ever done one for a new permit. All right, so very useful, thank you. So
Can I offer one last comment?
sure, of course.
So one other thing I would say is that probably the most important thing about how is with sense of okay and what isn't okay. Things people really fear is even coming to submit a permit.
Yes.
If they want it, and you have a slope and so, and to understand that it would be generally expected that something like this would be approved, and set things up so that you also explain that it's much better to do this before your bulkhead deteriorates, because then you may have, and all that is not clear to people.
Yeah, I agree, Larry, completely. And that's part of the big reason for the outreach, even beyond the other coordination things I've said here. I think we have a situation in the county where there's a fair amount of fear and rumor going around that really is preventing us from getting applications, and even from people preparing, where they could be doing it, maybe even without a permit from us, because we've created a situation with the past couple of years where people are afraid to do things. And so that's one of the purposes of the outreach, is to try to fix that. Hopefully we'll have a better public relations person than me.
Risk and a risk paradigm, and people who dread risk is probably the worst risk that people and it's risks that people just don't know about, particularly things like radiation. And in fact, you have radiation exposure if you go visit the Capitol, but it's not that. It's lower than if you cross the street maybe from, and so you deal with dread risk by providing people information. And so that's why this is really important. This is, I think, one of the most important things you can do.
So if I could, I would like to move this Fairfax County Wetlands Board goal and tasks as being approved by the Fairfax County Wetlands Board, so that we can move it forward to the Board of Supervisors, and you can use it as something that has been approved by the board. So I make that motion. Do I have a second?
Hey, Clyde, before we move ahead, I had one other item
Yes,
to consider. And I don't know if it would be suitable to add at this point. This might just be more of looking forward into this. I think there's another half to this, which is getting homeowners aware of their obligation. And I think there might be a possible lever here, because my understanding is when there is an easement or obligation of this sort that restricts use of the land, the tax department should be aware of it and should be providing tax relief to the homeowner. And if they're providing such a reduction in taxes because of that, we should be aware of it. In other words, when we have purview, the tax department should know it, and vice versa. And there may be a way to use that to inform them, because people are going to pay a lot more attention to their tax valuations and any addendums on there than they are to a newsletter. And likewise, it is difficult to argue to us when they have a violation letter, I didn't know, when every year you're getting a tax valuation saying you are getting a reduction because you have this obligation. And so I'm not entirely sure what the action item in here is, but I wonder if it's possible for us to explore whether there could be a collaboration between the tax department and us in establishing when there is a reduction, we should have purview, and when we have purview, there should be a reduction.
So John, I think you're going to be unhappy with what I say to you. At the last EQAC meeting, I raised a bunch of VDOT issues with the hope that somebody else would pick it up. And what EQAC said, well, Clyde, you raised it, you run with it. So John, I think it would be great if you tried to develop something along the lines of what you just proposed and bring it to our next meeting.
Okay. Well, if anybody knows someone at the tax department, please let me know.
Okay. All right. All right. So we have a second. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
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 That passes. Okay. Very good. You all have a draft outreach letter, I think. This is just a draft for you to use if you want to do it. I would like to ask that you go ahead and set up those meetings and keep Katie informed. That's all. Two of us can attend one of those meetings together. If you would like our wonderful new vice chair to join you, or myself, or Kim, or anyone else, just let us know and we'll join you. Okay, sound good? Very good. All right. I just want to confirm, it is my intention to reach out to Rachel Flynn. I'm kind of hoping no one has an objection to that. Okay, I will go ahead and do that. The next item on the agenda is the permit coordination with the county's Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. I think actually we've just discussed a great deal of that. However, I'd also like to point out that, as Katie has informed you, Chapter 118 is going through an update that was really administered through DEQ. There were some changes to the law. Again, I think back in 2020, and they're now just coming to be proposed in the ordinance. And the tidal wetlands are included in that coordination. But as you pointed out, as long as the tidal wetlands permitting that's being proposed as a water-related use, it doesn't appear like it has a big impact on tidal wetlands. However, I think that this is an important coordination aspect going forward.
So can I say a couple
Sure.
of things, just because I've talked with LDS a lot about what their intentions are, the Chapter 118. So just to give everyone a heads up, this is just an example. Our county code, that is the laws and regulations for the county, is set up into separate codes. These are the codes that typically impact land development. So you'll see Chapter 116, which is your zoning ordinance for wetlands listed here. Chapter 118 is obviously a separate chapter, so that's the Ches Bay ordinance. There's also Chapter 122, a tree conservation ordinance. The stormwater management is 124. So just to give you guys a framework that there's different ordinances that get updated at different times based on either direction from the state or some other mechanism. And then I just wanted to show this is the actual law, the General Assembly in 2020 that talks about, and the italicized text there is what was adopted as, and that is preempting the changes that the State Water Control Board is working with DEQ to implement. So I just wanted to show this as like a high level. So essentially there's been so much work over the last 4 years to take those italicized lines and figure out within DEQ and the State Water Control Board about how this should be implemented. And the edict is local jurisdictions that have a Ches Bay ordinance have to make certain changes within the ordinance that they have. And I have printouts from that show the actual like strikeouts and additions of text if you want to look at it from the state's like Federal Register of the Law change, if anyone wants to take a look at it. So they're here if anyone wants to take one with them. I wasn't planning to go through it, but what I wanted to try to sum this up on is that, and I feel like this was kind of discussed earlier, but these changes are going to continue to allow living shorelines to be implemented in Fairfax County. And all of the marked up changes that you see here must be adopted by our Board of Supervisors in September 2024. Like that's the state mandated deadline. So LDS is now starting their outreach component for what that process looks like. There was a presentation to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors has a couple subcommittees, as they call them. One is for land use, and they had a committee meeting earlier today in which LDS provided a presentation summarizing what this is and kind of what it's going to potentially mean for the ordinance. And when that video is posted on the county's website, I can send you all a link to it if you would like to watch it. I think it was about half hour worth of presentation and conversation with the board and with staff. And after that meeting, I spoke to LDF and they are willing to come to a Wetlands board meeting to have a similar conversation with you all. That would be an avenue to ask questions if you have questions about the interpretation of if you have questions about fill, right? Or is fill an allowable use for a living shoreline project? And generally the answer is yes. The living shoreline project that we saw on Caraby Lane in 2023 had proposed fill behind the sill, which JT knows because he helped design it. So that is allowable. Those things will continue to be allowable. So I just wanted to try to get a framework that LDS is happy to come to a meeting. I will send a link to that Board of Supervisors meeting because it was a Board of Supervisors subcommittee. So they were asking questions to staff. It wasn't just like a very formal conversation. And LDS is anticipating having a town hall, like a public town hall at some point here in the springtime to open it to a broader audience, these changes. So there's going to be lots of opportunity for engagement, but there's a recognition that they are available to come to a Wetlands board meeting. So that's my.
Very good. So thank you, Catherine. I think the importance of this is LDS is going to go out to the public because of these requirements that came through DEQ, not through VMRC. So you kind of have to realize just in the way that LDS and planning is separated 118 and 116, VMRC and DEQ are in different planets. All the coordination issues that everyone's talking about are all going to be present here. It would be great if we could use this town hall process as a part of this wetlands outreach that I'm talking about here as well.
Katie, when did you say they had to be done by?
It has to be adopted by the board and I think it's the end of September 2024.
Okay.
So there's going to be a town hall that LDS is going to host that's going to discuss all this, and I'll let you guys know when that gets scheduled. They are happy to come to the next Wetlands board meeting and do a presentation. They also, because this is a county code change and ordinance change, just as when we did this 4 years ago with chapter 116, your ordinance, there's public hearings that are associated with this as well. There's a public hearing that will probably happen in July or September for the board to hear public input on the proposed changes to this ordinance. That
Okay.
September.
All right. Any more questions on this subject? All right. Status update of routing permit applications.
I actually, it's been kind of quiet this winter, which is not uncommon, that the fall winter time is pretty quiet. I only have 2 that are kind of routing. One is up on, I have it in my notes here, sorry, I don't have them memorized. So the Purple Star is an undeveloped lot on Ferry Landing Court. They're proposing right now 140 feet of new riprap. There's potentially the use of old, like current existing riprap. But it was a little unclear in the initial submission. This has only come in for one permit review so far. The site, because it's undeveloped, is difficult to get to, so I want to do another site visit if they're going to come back with another submission and actually bear waders and get down to the shoreline. The application didn't have too many pictures of the shoreline existing as it is right now too, so I need some more information, but comments were sent back to them on January 11th. I asked for the NOAA sea level rise data set to be used, why a living shoreline wasn't being proposed, how they intend to tie into adjacent properties, and photos of the site, and then tying into the upland areas, because just as you all are aware, it's this property, because it's this Purple Star, it's got a long fetch, a southward facing fetch, and it does have portions of the shoreline that are pretty steep. I want to kind of see like if they're intending to put any riprap like further back up into the upland, or is it just going to be like 5 feet or 3 feet high of riprap and that's it, and then it kind of dips off on the landward side. So there's more information that I've asked for, and I can keep you all abreast of that one.
You might ask them if they consider a sill.
Breakwater or sill. Mm-hmm.
I can call them.
This kind of points out, one of the headaches of individual permits is that it's very hard to implement something like a sill or a breakwater for one home. Most of the places where there's been really success there, you get multiple properties being protected at the same time.
What's on each side of the property? Do the other owners have protection measures in place? Do we know?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the history of it's not very often we come across an undeveloped parcel these days. I think it was subdivided at some point and then sold. But it's heavily wooded too. That's the other thing, is it's got like some steep slopes and it's heavily wooded. So, but I'll keep you all updated on that. It's, but it's back with the applicant to kind of provide some more information. And then the Yellow Star is up on Burke Drive. They want to continue to reuse existing riprap and then add additional riprap to further stabilize the shoreline. I sent comments back in November, again, asking about tying into the adjacent properties, NOAA data, why they're not using or why they haven't proposed a living shoreline. I did have a conversation with Mike Johnson because he went to a site visit with me, and he was like, well, seems like they're definitely proposing some new riprap, but they want to continue to use some. But because they're proposing a significant amount, I forget, I don't know that they estimated the tonnage, but it was a long stretch. We both kind of agreed that we thought it would probably need a permit unless they change their proposed project. But if something comes in with a resubmission that makes it look like they don't need as much new material, then, you know, maybe we would call it maintenance. We'll have to see what they come back with.
Okay.
But that's really
Did
it.
they have a delineation, Catherine? Sorry, just a question. Did they have a delineation? A wetland delineation?
I think they had the mean high and mean low, yeah, on their sketches. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if an application comes in, it doesn't have the mean high, mean low, or 1.5 times, like, that's something we always ask for. So if I didn't ask for it, it was on there.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. And if at any time anyone wants to see the links to these submissions, you know, as always, VMRC publishes any submissions that they have. So if anyone wants to look at these, you're happy to do so. I can send you the links. So
We done?
I think so.
So I would like to move to table the meeting minutes until after the closed session. We can come back to it afterwards. And I think we've already had the public comment period. Thank you, gentlemen. And we are going to go to closed session. I move that the Fairfax County Wetlands Board.
Wait, I need to stop recording, and anyone who's not.
No, you need the motion.
Oh, sorry, go
You need
ahead.
to record the motion.
Yes.
So you ready? All right. I move that the Fairfax County Wetlands Board go to closed session with attorney from the county attorney's office to discuss specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice relating to case number CL-2023-18018, Justin Sand et al., v. Fairfax County Wetlands Board et al., and the property more particularly described as Fairfax County Tax Map Number 113-41, Parcel 30, which authority is granted to the Wetlands Board by the Board of Supervisors under the Wetlands Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 116 of the Fairfax County Code, Code Section 28.1.113, and is set forth in the bylaws, all as permitted by Virginia Code Sections 2.2311A, 7, and 8. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are in this session. All right. Thank you. Gentlemen, we will go back into open session afterwards. You're perfectly happy to stay and come back. The only thing we have left is to potentially approve minutes, but the door will be reopened when we're done. Lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and all the other such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which this closed session was covered, was heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session. I move that we move out of the closed session.
Second.
All
Second.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are out of closed session.
The records show that all members of the Wetlands Board affirmed that only matters of that were designated to be covered in closed session were covered in closed session.
Good.
Yes.
We tabled the meeting minutes. Mark, have you reviewed those meeting minutes?
No, I have not.
Mark, I would like you to see those meeting minutes before we vote on them.
Is this the October minutes?
Yes. Is that all right with you?
Yes. Do I need to do that tonight?
No,
Okay.
we won't vote on it until the next session.
Did I'm sorry, did your closing motion include direction that
Direction.
the county attorney take action as discussed in closed session?
No.
Okay, will you make a motion to that effect?
I move that the county attorney take the action called for in the closed section, move forward.
As it relates to,
As it relates to, here we go. Case number CL 2023-180118, Justin Sand et al., the Fairfax County Wetlands Board et al., and the property more particularly described as Fairfax County Tax Map number, map reference 113-4130.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
okay, thank you. And I'll take a look at those minutes.
All right, is that all right with everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're all right, but
Okay,
Can't hurt to check.
yeah, right now they're not finalized.
okay.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, remote folks. Take
Thank
care.
you. Appreciate it.